This is Nico Allen Jenkins.
You don't get that power today, so no, I don't have anything to say to you.
Jenkins's appearance might look frightening, but his crimes are even more terrifying. Nico Jenkins was a troubled man, to put it mildly. At a young age, he had spent more than a decade behind bars for carjacking and assault before being released on parole in July 2013. But 2 weeks after his release, he embarked on a killing spree that would terrorize Omaha, Nebraska. Jenkins claimed that he was acting under the orders of the ancient Egyptian serpent god Apophis when he committed the murders. His first victims were Juan Uribe Peña and Jorge Cajiga Ruiz, who he had lured to meet 2 women for a sexual encounter. Jenkins shot them both in the head and turned their pockets inside out. Less than 2 weeks later, Curtis Bradford was found dead outside a garage. Jenkins had posed for a Facebook photo with Bradford just the day before. And on August 21, Andrea Kruger was shot multiple times with a 12-gauge shotgun as she was returning home from her bartending job. Kruger's gold SUV was found abandoned 12 miles away, and investigators believe that Jenkins had stolen it before abandoning it and attempting to set it on fire. Jenkins was eventually caught, found competent to stand trial, and convicted of the 4 murders. He was sentenced to death in May 2017 and 450 years in prison on weapons charges. When Jenkins heard his sentence, he showed no reaction, but for the mother of one of his victims, it brings closure and healing.
The defendant's commission of these 4 murders over a 10-day period is one of the worst killing sprees in the history of this state.
You don't get the glory today. I get the glory. My family gets the glory. God gets the glory.
If you think that Jenkins's reaction was strange, let me introduce you to Jaleel Smith Riley. This is Jaleel Smith Riley. He might look harmless and may have shown remorse in court, but his actions reveal his true colors. In November 2013, Norwood, Ohio was shaken by a tragic incident that would leave a young woman dead and a man permanently disabled. Portia Brooks and her boyfriend, Aaron Martin, were attacked during an attempted robbery, resulting in Brooks's death after several days in the hospital. Martin survived the incident, but was left with permanent health problems. Nearly 3 years after the crime, Jaleel Smith Riley confessed to being the perpetrator. Smith Riley was indicted on charges that could have resulted in the death penalty. Still, he pleaded guilty and was convicted by Hamilton County Common Pleas Judge Charles Kubicki. During the trial, Brooks's family spoke in court about how they had been affected by her death. Her mother, Sharon Brooks, remembered her daughter as a bright and outgoing young woman who had a passion for working with animals. She expressed the emotional devastation that her family had suffered as a result of her daughter's death.
It's dark. I'm sure with the help of my family, my daughter, my son, I'm sure I'll be able to one day, but this day marks the first day of being able to do that.
Martin's family also spoke about how the shooting had impacted their lives. They remembered the young couple as happy and in love before the incident. Martin, who suffered permanent injuries after being shot in the head, talked about how he would never be able to achieve his dream of becoming a firefighter because of his disabilities. Eventually, Smith Riley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When Smith Riley heard his sentence, he collapsed in the courtroom and had to be helped to his feet by sheriff's deputies.
Or defendants serve a term of life without parole. As to count 4 for the offense of attempted murder, violation.
Smith Riley's apologies and reactions may have shown that he is truly remorseful for what he did, but it was literally too late to apologize. There are consequences for actions no matter how remorseful you are after doing them. Then there are people that don't show this remorse but are shocked when they hear the punishment for their actions. A good example is Seth Welch. Next, we take you to Michigan, where Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari are in court for the murder of 10-month-old baby Mary Welch.
In Solon Township, that you're both charged with what they call felony murder while in the perpetration or attempted perpetration of child abuse in the first degree. They're alleging that you murdered one Mary Welch. That is a charge called homicide felony murder.
Mary Welch was born into a family that loved her, but their beliefs and distrust of the medical system proved fatal. Her parents, Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari, were convicted of first-degree murder after Mary's death was attributed to neglect. Child Protective Services had been in contact with the family since 2014, when THC was found in the system of their eldest newborn child. Despite this, Mary weighed only 8 pounds at the time of her death. Her parents knew she was underweight, but refused to seek medical assistance, citing religious reasons and a lack of trust in the medical system. In fact, at the time of Mary's death, 2 of the couple's 3 children had never been to a licensed doctor. The county sheriff testified that the family home was not hygienic, with vermin, insects, and mold present during the initial investigation. The doctor who performed the autopsy stated that the infant was suffering from chronic malnutrition caused by the withholding of food and water. Following Mary's death, CPS sought to terminate the couple's parental rights. The couple was initially charged with felony murder in August 2018. Seth Welch was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in June 2020 after being found guilty of first-degree murder. In 2021, Tatiana Fusari testified that her husband was abusive and would rape and beat her. She claimed she was not permitted to take Mary to a doctor and blamed the abuse for being unable to care for her daughter. She also claimed she didn't know the cause of her daughter's death. Fusari was found guilty of first-degree murder in November 2021 and was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She was also sentenced to an extra 15 to 30 years for the charge of first-degree child abuse. The video of her reaction to the charge subsequently went viral.
It requires a DNA sample to be taken upon arrest, which is often like a cotton swab or in the inside of your cheek. The second offense that you're both charged with is called child abuse in the first degree, where they're alleging you knowingly or intentionally caused serious physical harm to a child. They're talking about this Mary Welch. It is a felony, possible penalty of up to life imprisonment.
Whatever their beliefs, they'll have enough time to think it over in prison. It serves them right, don't you agree? Killing someone is despicable, but starving your own baby to death, there's no excuse for that. Among people who would kill their loved ones and somehow expect to go scot-free and appear shocked when the consequences of their actions knock is Diana Lovejoy. This is Diana Jean Lovejoy.
Within the meaning of Penal Code Section 12022, Paren A, Paren 1, dated 11/13/17, signed foreperson.
A sensational and tragic story unfolded in the California town of Carlsbad, involving a mother who tried to have her estranged husband killed. Diana Lovejoy was in the throes of a divorce and bitter custody battle with her husband, Greg Mulvihill. As things progressed, Lovejoy tried to manipulate and deceive her lover, Weldon McDavid Jr., into carrying out the hit with tales of abuse and lies about custody. McDavid must have believed her because they lured Mulvihill to an isolated area and shot him. The victim survived the attack, which took place on a dark dirt path in Carlsbad in 2016. During their hearing, Lovejoy and McDavid denied the murder-for-hire scheme existed and picked apart the evidence against them. Lovejoy cried throughout her statement to the judge, claiming she could never take her son's father away from him. McDavid said the trial's testimony was untrue and the system was broken. Despite their claims, the prosecutor argued that the allegations against Mulvihill were purely a manipulation by Lovejoy to gain sole custody. To shoot Mulvihill, the lovers created a plot that involved McDavid. Using a burner phone, he told Lovejoy to call Mulvihill and pretend to be a private investigator. McDavid then informed Mulvihill he had evidence that he was abusive. The evidence would be left on a pole along a dirt path in Carlsbad. Mulvihill was lured there, and McDavid shot him in the side. McDavid claimed he had only tried to shoot out the light in Mulvihill's hand, fearing that he was armed. Lovejoy paid the ultimate price for her betrayal, receiving a sentence of 26 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. McDavid, who pulled the trigger and shot Mulvihill, was given a 50-year sentence. When Lovejoy heard her sentence, she fainted in the court and had to be wheeled out.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Weldon K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
It's not every day that people faint in court, but that is understandable. Also, it's not every day that people commit crimes under police custody unless you're Esteban Carpio. You're looking at Esteban Carpio.
So rarely does.
Esteban Carpio's life changed forever on April 17, 2005. Carpio was born on July 30, 1978 in Boston, Massachusetts. He had a troubled childhood. By the time he was 16, he had already been arrested for assault and battery. He continued to be in and out of prison throughout his life, with several convictions for drug-related crimes and other violent offenses. Providence police were questioning Carpio for stabbing Madeline Gata, an 85-year-old woman, when he was left alone with Detective Sergeant James L. Allen. The second detective had gone to get Carpio a glass of water. However, when he returned, he found Carpio had taken Allen's gun and shot him twice, killing him. Carpio then jumped out of the third-floor window and made a run for it, but he was apprehended 45 minutes later. At his arraignment, Carpio appeared wearing a mask designed to prevent people from spitting or biting others. His eyes were red and his face was swollen, stunning the courtroom. His family members screamed and shouted as he entered the courtroom. They made accusations of police brutality, but according to Providence Police Chief Dean M. Esserman, Carpio's injuries resulted from his jump from the building and struggle with law enforcement. At trial, Christopher Zarella, a state police detective who helped in the arrest, testified that he had punched Carpio 3 times, breaking bones in his face. However, an FBI investigation indicated that his injuries were consistent with jumping off a building and struggling with the police. The report concluded that no excessive force was used. Carpio was found guilty of Detective Allen's murder and the stabbing of Madeline Gata in June 2006. The jury rejected Carpio's insanity defense, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Carpio showed no reaction.
Rejects his insanity defense and finds him guilty of murdering James Allen. The judge gives him the maximum sentence allowed, life without parole.
Carpio's family members showed more reaction in court than he did, even though their reactions raised eyebrows. No matter how you feel about the police, it's never right to kill or harm them. But if that was in doubt, then you don't know about Ryan Stone. This is Ryan Stone.
Yeah, my lawyer told me I made the news in the UK and Australia.
Ryan Stone's crime spree began innocuously enough with the theft of a car with a child in the back seat. But what followed was a chaotic, high-speed chase across 5 counties that lasted 1.5 hours and covered 75 miles. Stone's crazy chase was even shown on live television. Stone carjacked several drivers along the way and led police on a chase that exceeded 100 miles per hour during morning rush hour. The chase ended dramatically in Lone Tree, where Stone was finally taken into custody. Unfortunately, the damage was already done. Trooper Bellaman He was seriously injured while trying to stop the chase. He suffered several broken bones and shattered his leg in more than 20 places. Stone was eventually sentenced to 160 years in prison for attempted manslaughter and dozens of other charges in Douglas County Court. During his sentencing, prosecutors surprised everyone by airing recordings of calls Stone made from jail to friends and family. Stone could be heard laughing about the chase in those recordings and even used profanity to describe Trooper He. Family members who testified in court tried to paint Stone as remorseful, but the judge was not convinced. Despite his injuries, Trooper He remains committed to returning to full active duty with the Colorado State Patrol. He spoke of his pride in wearing his badge and being part of the law enforcement family. He is still in constant pain after 7 surgeries, but he remains determined to return to the job he loves. As for Stone, Arapahoe County District Attorney George Brockler believes he will likely die behind bars. Stone will be eligible for parole in approximately 75 years. Still, the county district attorney does not expect him to ever get out of prison. Stone's actions during the high-speed chase and his lack of remorse in the recordings, and even as his sentence was read, convinced the judge that he deserved a harsh sentence.